A rich girl humiliated the waitress in front of a room full of strangers. What happened next was the kind of thing people whisper about for years because some insults don't just land on skin. They awaken something dangerous in the wrong man. If you've ever smiled through disrespect, swallowed anger because you needed the paycheck, or stood in a room where everyone saw what happened and nobody moved, this story will hit harder than you expect. The smell of burnt coffee, the neon glow on cracked diner windows, the sound of laughter cutting through your chest while you pretend you're fine. That is where this begins. But this is not just a story about humiliation. It's about power, dignity, and what changes when someone finally says, enough. Stay with me to the end and comment your city and where you're watching from. That was where it began, under cheap lights and a buzzing neon sign in a place the city only noticed when it needed coffee after midnight. Rosie's all-night grill sat on the edge of the South Loop like it had been forgotten on purpose. The windows were always a little greasy no matter how often they were wiped. The booths had cracks sealed over with tape the color of old blood. A radio behind the counter caught one station on clear nights and dissolved into static when the weather changed. The air never belonged to one smell for long. Burnt coffee lived there. Bacon grease lived there. So did bleach syrup wet coats in winter, and that metallic chill that came in every time the front door opened after dark. For Emily Carter, it was just work. That was the saddest part. At 25, she could carry 4 plates at once. Smile through a headache, dodge, wandering hands, and remember who took cream and who took sugar without writing it down. She knew how to refill a cup before a customer asked. She knew how to tell when somebody wanted conversation, and when they wanted to be left alone with their eggs and whatever grief had followed them in from the street. She knew how to laugh softly when men called her sweetheart like they invented the word. She knew how to apologize for kitchen mistakes that had nothing to do with her and somehow make people feel generous for not yelling. She knew how to disappear in plain sight. She tied her apron the same way every shift, tight enough to feel held together. Her dark blonde hair went up in a quick knot at the back of her head. A few pieces always escaped around her face no matter what she did, and by the end of the night they clung there with heat and steam and exhaustion. She wore little makeup because there was no point wasting money on something sweat would erase by midnight. A faded silver ring sat on a chain under her uniform, hidden beneath the fabric at her throat. Her mother's ring. The only thing she still wore like a promise. Rosie's was not where she thought her life would happen. It was where she ended up after life happened first. By 6 that evening, the dinner rush had started to thin, and Emily moved with the steady pace of someone who could not afford to slow down. She topped off a trucker's coffee, dropped ranch dressing at table 7, and carried a plate of meatloaf to a man in a suit who looked like he was eating his divorce one bite at a time. Outside, Chicago had gone hard and silver with winter. The sidewalks shone with old ice. The streetlights had that blurry halo they got in the cold. Every breath from every passerby looked like it might shatter. Behind the register, Rosie herself was counting bills with a pair of reading glasses low on her nose. Rosie had owned the diner for 32 years and trusted almost no one, but she trusted Emily. Maybe because Emily had never once pretended she was above this place. Maybe because she came in early, stayed late, and treated the cracked floor and chipped mugs like they still deserved respect. Rosie had offered her a raise twice and only managed it once. Margins were thin, everyone knew it. Emily took the extra $1 an hour and thanked her like it was rescue. "You ate yet?" Rosie asked without looking up. Emily slid a stack of clean pie plates into place. "Not hungry." Rosie gave her a look that said liar. Emily smiled anyway. She had eaten half a granola bar in the supply closet around 4:30 and called it enough. Rent was due in 4 days. Her younger sister Ava had texted that morning asking if Emily could help with the gas bill again because the landlord in Cicero had raised one fee and invented another. Emily sent what she could before her shift even started and told herself she would make it up in tips over the weekend. That was how her life moved now. Quiet arithmetic. Little sacrifices so old they no longer felt like losses. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket as she passed the pie case. She glanced down. "Ava, Emily opened the message under the counter while the grill hissed behind her. "You sure you can do this month?" Emily typed back with one hand. "I got you. Stop worrying." A second later came the reply. "You always say that." Emily looked at the words for a second too long. There were too many honest answers she could have sent. She picked none of them. That was her talent, not breaking in ways other people could hear. By 7:30, the wind had picked up. The front door opened every few minutes with a slap of cold air. Nurses in navy scrubs came and went. A pair of college boys shared fries and looked like they were trying to stretch one basket into a whole evening. Two cops sat at the counter with coffee that kept going cold while they talked low about a burglary in Bridgeport. And then a little after 8, the back corner booth filled. It happened every Thursday. They never called ahead. They never needed to. 3 men came in first, all dark coats and sharp eyes, their presence too quiet to be harmless. One was broad-shouldered and built like a safe door. Another had a face too handsome to trust with a scar at the edge of his mouth that only showed when he smiled, which wasn't often. They took the booth by the windowless wall and sat with their backs where they could see the whole room. Then came the 4th man, Vincent Moretti. His name never needed volume. It had weight all on its own. Emily had heard it the way everyone in Chicago heard names like that, half in rumor, half in warning. At the grocery store line behind 2 women who stopped talking when a black sedan pulled up outside, in a police officer's tired shrug, in the voice of an old customer who leaned over his pie and said, "Some men don't run for office because the city already belongs to them." She had never asked what Vincent Moretti really was. She did not need to. There are men whose power arrives in noise, in bodyguards, and laughing too loud and wanting every room to prove it sees them. Vincent was not one of those men. He entered like the room had always been waiting to take his shape. He wore a charcoal coat over a dark suit that fit too well to be flashy. No rings except a watch that caught the light when he reached to unbutton his cuffs. His hair was black and cut close enough to look disciplined, not fashionable. His face was not soft anywhere. Handsome, yes, but in a way that suggested bad decisions for women and worse ones for men. His eyes were the thing people remembered. Deep-set, unreadable, the kind that seemed to land on a person and take inventory before they could blink. Emily picked up a coffee pot and went to their table because that was what she always did. "Evening," she said. "Evening, miss," said the scarred man, who she knew only as Nico, because Rosie once muttered his name under her breath after they left. Vincent said nothing at first. He looked at her with that same calm, unsettling focus he always had, as if he was reading something she had not meant to leave out in the open. She poured his coffee. He took it black. "Always black. Busy night?" he asked. His voice surprised her the first time she heard it. Low, controlled with that smoothness some men had when they never needed to repeat themselves. "Busy enough," Emily said. She moved to top off the others. As she reached across the table, the sleeve of her uniform shifted and exposed the inside of her wrist. Faint yellowing there, old bruises almost gone. Almost. Vincent's gaze dropped once, then rose back to her face. He did not comment. That almost made it worse. "Need anything else?" she asked. Nico smiled a little. "Depends. You got pie left. Apple and pecan." "2 pecan." Vincent kept looking at her. Emily held the coffee pot a little tighter than necessary. There was nothing flirtatious in his stare. Nothing lazy or entitled. If anything, it was more dangerous than that. It felt like recognition without permission. She turned away first. At the counter, Rosie slid 2 slices onto plates and muttered, "That man looks at you like he knows something." Emily kept her eyes on the whipped cream can. "Maybe he knows I forgot table 4's toast," Rosie snorted. "Men like that don't come here for pie." Emily did not answer, because part of her had been thinking the same thing for weeks. Vincent never stayed very long. 40 minutes, maybe an hour, coffee, sometimes pie. Quiet conversation at a volume that never carried. Nobody bothered them. Nobody even looked too long if they were smart. Yet he kept coming back every Thursday, same time, same booth. And every time Emily approached, she felt the air sharpen in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with being seen when she had worked very hard not to be. She delivered the pie and kept moving. A man in a Cubs cap complained that his fries were cold. A teenager at the counter asked for extra pickles. Someone laughed too hard near the jukebox. The clock above the register crawled toward 9. Emily's feet ached. Her shoulders were tight. The heat from the kitchen sat at the base of her neck like a hand she wanted to shrug off and couldn't. Then the front door opened and the room changed. Not because it got louder, Rosie's had loud all the time, because the noise that came in was sharp, polished, chosen. 3 girls and a boy stepped through the door wrapped in expensive coats and the kind of confidence that only grew in people who had never been told no in any way that mattered. They looked too clean for the diner, too curated. Every piece of them was meant to be seen. Boots without salt stains. Hair arranged like they had just left a camera, not the street. Phones already out before they even sat down. The blonde at the front did not just enter. She arrived. Madison Hale. Emily knew her face before she placed the name. Chicago political ads had made sure of that. She had seen that same smile beside her father's shoulder in campaign photos every election season. Family values. Service. Leadership. Madison in pearls at charity galas. Madison holding canned goods at holiday drives. Madison beside her father at some ribbon cutting in a school she would never have attended herself. In person she looked younger and meaner. 18, maybe? Pretty in a way that had been sharpened into a weapon by knowing it worked. Her coat was white, the kind of white nobody wore unless they lived life without consequence. Diamond studs caught in her ears when she turned her head. Her mouth held that cruel little curve some people mistook for confidence. They took the booth by the front window. Cute, one of the girls said, filming the neon sign. This place is like if depression served pancakes. The boy laughed because he wanted Madison to hear it. Emily picked up her pad and crossed the floor. What can I get you? She asked. Madison barely looked at her. 4 chocolate shakes. Emily wrote it down. And a round of tequila. Emily glanced up. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Madison finally looked at her then. Can't or won't, you're underage. One of Madison's friends made a face. How old do I look to you? Emily kept her voice even. Old enough to know the law still counts. The boy barked a laugh and covered it quickly. Madison's smile changed shape. It lost warmth she never had to begin with. You know who I am. Emily knew that game. She had seen some version of it all her life. The customer who wanted the food free because he knew the owner of the laundromat next door. The man who asked if she knew how much business he brought in here. The woman who pronounced a last name, slowly waiting for recognition to behave like a threat. Emily kept her pen on the pad. Yes, she said. And I still can't serve you tequila. Madison leaned back against the cracked red vinyl and folded one perfect leg over the other. That is adorable. Her friend lifted a phone. Emily saw the camera lens angle toward her. Her stomach tightened. Then bring the milkshakes, Madison said. And make them fast. We were somewhere nice before this. Rosie's went on breathing around them. Plates clinked. Coffee poured. But Emily felt the shift. People listened when rich girls got bored. Bored rich girls made sport out of whatever stood nearest. She turned and headed for the counter. Behind her, Madison's voice floated out sweet and loud enough to carry. Can you believe they still make uniforms like that? I thought this whole dying American diner thing was just for movies. A ripple of laughter from the booth. Emily kept walking. Rosie met her eyes as she reached for the blender cup's trouble. Emily measured syrup into metal. Maybe. Want me to take them? Emily shook her head. No, if I hand it off, they win faster. Rosie looked like she wanted to say something more, but didn't. The milkshake machine roared alive. Vanilla ice cream, chocolate syrup, milk. The ordinary ritual of making something sweet for people who had not earned sweetness from you. Emily pressed the cup into place and stared at the turning spindle. In the reflection on the chrome mixer, she could see the booth by the window, blurry and laughing. She thought of Ava, the gas bill, the envelope under her mattress with rent money folded into 3 worn 20s and a stack of 5s. She thought of Tyler's voice months earlier telling her she always thought she was better than people when all she did was serve food to drunks. She thought of the bruise he left that last time he grabbed her wrist hard enough to make a point. She thought of all the times she had swallowed words that wanted to come out sharp because being right never paid a utility bill. She poured the shakes into frosted glasses and set them on a tray. As she turned, her eyes caught Vincent's booth by accident. He was already watching. Not Madison, not the phones, her. Emily looked away so quickly she nearly spilled whipped cream down her apron. She carried the tray across the diner and set the milkshakes down one by one. Madison took a long look at Emily's face, at the plainness of exhaustion, at the effort of dignity. "Tell me something," Madison said. "Do you always look this miserable, or is that just your customer service face?" Emily straightened. "Anything else?" "Yeah," Madison said. "A personality." Her friends laughed again. The boy seemed less amused now. He glanced at the back booth, then back at Madison, then at his phone like he suddenly wasn't sure this was funny anymore. Emily turned to leave. Then Madison said, "Wait." Emily stopped. Madison tilted her head. "You must make, what, $20 an hour if people pity you enough." Emily met her eyes, sometimes less. Madison smiled as if that answer entertained her. "That's incredible. My father spends more on floral arrangements for one fundraiser dinner than this place makes in a week." Emily's mouth went dry. Somewhere behind her, a coffee cup clicked against a saucer. No one spoke. Madison gestured vaguely at the diner. "Look around. Sticky menus, bad lighting, this smell. And you stand in it every night like it's normal." Emily heard herself say, "For some people it is." "That landed." One of the girls sucked in a little breath. Madison's smile turned thin. "So touchy," she said. "I was just trying to imagine what it must feel like to wake up already losing." Emily felt the tray edge press into her palm. There are insults that hit like slaps and insults that hit like mirrors. This one went deeper because it walked straight toward the fear she kept locked up and spoke it out loud in a voice everyone could hear. Her chin lifted a fraction. "You got your shakes," Emily said. "Enjoy." She walked away before Madison could answer. Halfway to the counter, she heard a hissed laugh and then the soft chime of a phone camera locking focus. Rosie stepped beside her. "You done with them?" "I'm trying to be." "Then stay away from the window." Emily reached for the coffee pot again because standing still felt too much like surrender. She moved through the next 10 minutes on instinct, taking orders, clearing plates, feeling every nerve in her back aimed at that booth. At 9:25, Officer Nolan Reed came in from the cold, stamping snow off his boots. He was in uniform, broad-shouldered, kind-eyed, older than Emily by maybe 15 years. He took the same stool at the counter every Thursday if he was on shift and ordered meatloaf and coffee without looking at the menu. "Evening, Em," he said. "Evening, Nolan." He studied her face. "You look like you need a winning lottery ticket. I'd settle for decent tips." He smiled. "Keep dreaming." She poured his coffee. As she did, his gaze moved past her toward the front booth. His face changed almost imperceptibly. "That's Senator Hale's kid." Emily nodded once. He exhaled through his nose. "That usually means paperwork for someone. Not me if I can help it." Nolan looked toward the back booth next. Whatever passed through his expression then was closer to concern. The city was small in certain ways. Everybody knew where not to look for too long. He lowered his voice. "Need anything?" Emily almost said no. Then Madison laughed again, high and bright and brittle as broken glass. Emily said, "Just a quiet hour." Nolan glanced between the two booths one more time, then patted the counter with 2 fingers. "I'll be right here." That should have comforted her. It didn't, because she had the sudden strange sense that the room was not balancing toward calm. It was balancing toward impact. She picked up an order for booth 6, delivered it, collected change, returned to the counter. The clock moved. The fry cook cursed softly in the kitchen when a basket slipped. Someone opened the door and let in another gust of winter. Emily could feel Madison's attention like heat between her shoulder blades. At the back booth, Vincent had not touched his pie. His coffee had gone half cold. Nico was saying something to him low and careful, but Vincent's focus remained fixed somewhere beyond the table. On her, not the way men watched women when they wanted something immediate and stupid. The way a predator watches a shift in wind. Emily turned away and went to wipe down the pie case, though it did not need wiping. "Stop moving so fast," Rosie murmured. "You're making me nervous." Emily almost laughed. "That makes 2 of us." Rosie set down the register tape and leaned in. "That Hale girl came in here last summer with some friends. Filmed a dishwasher out back because his English wasn't good. Put it online. Thought it was funny. I told her never come back. Guess she forgot." Emily stared. "Why didn't you tell me that before?" "Because if I told you every rich person in this city who confuses money with permission, we'd both be too tired to finish the shift." Emily looked toward Madison again. The girl had one elbow on the table now, straw between 2 perfect fingers. Eyes bright with the particular cruelty of someone still deciding how far she wanted to go. The phone on the table was still recording, and in the back corner, Vincent Moretti had gone completely still. A second later, the front window flashed with reflected headlights as a black SUV rolled slow past the diner and kept going. Emily saw it only for an instant, but she felt it too. The city outside seemed to tighten around the building. Inside, Rosie's hummed on, ordinary and doomed and lit like a stage nobody had meant to build. Emily picked up a fresh order pad because her hands needed something to do. At the counter, Officer Nolan had gone quiet. Rosie was no longer counting bills. Even the fry cook seemed to sense it. The kitchen noise dropped into a strange, uneasy rhythm as if the diner itself were listening. Emily drew one steady breath and headed back toward the floor. Then Madison. Hale lifted her chin, smiled for the room like she was about to give them something to remember. And Emily knew the night was no longer hers to keep small. And just like that, the room gave her back the sound of breathing. Nobody spoke right away after Madison and her friends fled into the cold. The diner seemed to hold itself still for one long, suspended second, as if it did not trust the danger had really passed. Emily remained exactly where she was, tray hanging at her side, the skin of her cheek still burning even though Vincent Moretti had already wiped it clean. Her body had gone quiet in the worst way, not calm. Shock had a stillness of its own. Vincent stood beside the front booth for one heartbeat longer, his expression unreadable. His shoulders relaxed in that dangerous way some men looked when violence was the easiest thing in the room, and they had simply chosen not to use it. Then he turned to her. "Are you hurt?" Emily opened her mouth. Nothing came out at first. Her throat felt lined with ash. "No," she said finally, though she was not sure that was true. "I'm fine." Vincent looked at her long enough to let her hear the weakness in that answer for herself. Then he gave a small nod as though he understood lies people told to keep standing. He reached into his jacket, placed a folded $100 bill under the untouched pie plate at his booth, and took one step backward. "Go wash your face," he said. It should have irritated her, the certainty in his tone. It should have felt like one more man telling her what to do. Instead, it sounded almost gentle. By the time she looked up again, he was already walking toward the door. Nico and the other men fell in beside him without a word. The bell over the entrance rattled once. Cold air surged in, then out. The black SUV she had seen from the window slid away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. Only then did Rosie seem to remember how to move. "Emily," she said sharply. "Honey?" Emily blinked. Rosie was in front of her now, one hand on her elbow. Officer Nolan had risen from his stool at the counter. Two customers nearby pretended very hard to study their plates. Emily put the tray down before she dropped it. "I'm okay," she said again. Rosie gave her a look that did not believe a word. "Bathroom," Rosie said. "Now." Emily nodded because it was easier than refusing. She crossed the diner in a haze, pushed through the narrow hallway by the kitchen, and shut herself into the tiny staff bathroom. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The mirror had a crack down one corner and made everybody look a little more tired than they already were. Emily braced both hands on the sink and stared at herself. Her cheek was pink where Madison's spit had landed. Her eyes looked too wide, almost feverish. Her hair had come loose around her face. There was no visible sign of what had happened that would make sense to anyone who had not stood there and felt a room full of strangers watch them become less than human. She turned on the tap and let cold water run over her fingers before splashing her face. When she closed her eyes, she felt it again. The wet shock, the laughter. Then Vincent's hand under her chin, the napkin against her skin, his voice low and calm as if dignity could be restored with enough certainty. That part unsettled her most. Not that he had stepped in, that he had done it like she mattered. Emily dried her face with brown paper towels and leaned against the sink until the pounding in her chest eased into something more bearable. When she came back out, the diner had begun the sad little ritual people perform after public ugliness. They spoke too softly. They avoided direct eye contact. They over-tipped as if money could buy them innocence. Madison's milkshake still sat on the table by the window, untouched except for the lipstick mark on the straw. Rosie was wiping the booth with more force than the mess required. Officer Nolan looked up as Emily approached. "You sure you're all right?" he asked. Emily nodded. He lowered his voice. "That girl's father is Senator Charles Hale. I know who she is." "No," he said, and there was a weariness in him now that she recognized from other nights when he had come in after things he could not fix. "I mean, I know exactly who she is. People like that do not like being embarrassed." Emily glanced toward the front window. Snow had started drifting again, thin and dry under the streetlights. She spat on me, Emily said. Saying it out loud made it uglier. Nolan rubbed a hand over his jaw. I saw enough. Rosie slammed the rag into the bus tub. Everybody saw enough. Nolan's gaze shifted briefly toward the door Vincent had used, and a whole lot of people saw who made her apologize. That sat between them. Emily looked down at the counter at the sugar caddies arranged in neat little rows. Do I need to worry about him too? Nolan asked. She did not answer. He was quiet for a second. I think a man like that worries about exactly what he wants to worry about. The problem is nobody else gets a vote. Rosie muttered something under her breath that sounded like a prayer or a curse. The rest of the shift dragged itself forward. Customers kept coming because diners did not care what happened inside them as long as coffee still poured. Emily worked because working was the only shape she knew how to wear when she did not know what else to do with herself. She carried plates, cashed checks, smiled when necessary. Her body moved. Her mind lagged behind. Every so often a phone lit up somewhere in the room. A glance lingered too long. A whisper rose, then died. She caught her own name once from a booth by the jukebox and did not turn to see who said it. By the time Rosie locked the front door after midnight, snow had thickened over the sidewalk and a powdery white skin. The neon sign in the window flashed open in tired pink light, even though the place was closed and half asleep. You're not walking home alone? Rosie said. I do every night. Not tonight. Emily picked up her coat from the hook by the register. Rosie, I can't afford a cab. Nolan stood from the counter stool and tossed a couple of bills beside his empty plate. I'll drive behind you. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off with a look. It's not charity, he said. It's common sense. She wanted to argue. She wanted more than that to go home and peel this whole night off her skin in the shower until nothing of it remained. But exhaustion had made her less stubborn, not more. Fine, she said. Outside the cold hit hard enough to sting. Emily pulled her coat tighter and started down the block boots, crunching through fresh snow. Nolan's cruiser stayed half a car length behind at the curb lights off. The city around her looked scrubbed empty, as if winter had erased everybody but the ones still unlucky enough to be awake. Her apartment was 3 blocks away above a laundromat that never seemed fully clean. The stairwell smelled like detergent and old cigarettes. By the time she reached her door, her fingers had gone numb around her keys. Nolan rolled down his window. Call if you need anything, he said. Emily managed a tired smile. Thanks. He watched until she unlocked the door and stepped inside, then drove off. Her apartment was 1 room and a kitchenette if you were feeling generous. A narrow bed by the radiator. A thrifted lamp with a crooked shade. 2 shelves of books she kept more for company than reading. The sink dripped unless she twisted the handle just right. The window over the fire escape let in a draft that never really left, no matter how much weather stripping she bought. Emily locked the door, slid the chain across, and stood there in silence. Then she looked at her phone. 17 notifications. Her stomach turned before she even opened them. Ava had texted twice. You okay? Are you awake? There were 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 voicemail she did not play. Half a dozen social media alerts, all from an account she barely used anymore. She tapped one and the screen loaded slowly, then all at once. There she was, her own face frozen in humiliation from a dozen angles, a blurry clip from the diner. The front booth. Madison's laugh. Emily turning away. Then the footage cut before the spit cut again, before the apology cut again to Vincent stepping forward. The caption read in sharp white letters over the video. Chicago waitress harasses senator's daughter until local mob figure intervenes. Emily stared at the words until they stopped making sense. There were comments already. She looks unstable. Probably wanted attention. That man threatened a teenage girl. These service people always think they can be rude and hide behind being poor. Emily's thumb trembled over the screen. Another clip loaded from a different account, slower this time, zoomed in and edited so tightly that the whole truth had no room to exist. Madison looked startled. Emily looked tense. Vincent looked monstrous. The comments moved too fast. She shut the phone off and threw it onto the bed like it had burned her. For one irrational second, she wanted to call Vincent Moretti and ask him what exactly he had dragged her into simply by standing up. Then she laughed once hollow and mean at herself because she did not have his number and because this was not his fault. It was hers only in the way every bad thing had somehow learned to feel like hers after enough years. Emily peeled off her uniform, showered fast, and stood under the water until it went lukewarm. She scrubbed her face twice. The second time she caught herself rubbing the spot on her cheek where his hand had steadied her, and stopped so suddenly she nearly slipped. By the time she climbed into bed, it was almost 2. She texted Ava. "I'm okay, just a long night." Ava wrote back almost instantly. "You don't sound okay." Emily set the phone face down without answering. Sleep came in fragments. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Madison's smile, then Vincent's, one mean and bright, one dark and unreadable. Somewhere after 3, she finally drifted into a thin, uneasy rest. The knock on her door the next morning sounded polite. That was the first thing wrong with it. Emily opened her eyes to gray light through the window and the dry rattle of the radiator. Her phone said 8:12. The knock came again, measured not loud enough to alarm the neighbors. She sat up disoriented. Nobody came here unexpectedly, not unless they wanted something. She pulled on jeans and a sweater, checked the peephole, and saw 2 men in dark coats standing in the hall. One older with a neat tie and a face that looked built for fundraisers. The other younger and broader, restless in the shoulders. Ms. Carter, the older one, called through the door. "We just need a moment." Emily did not unlock it. "Who are you?" "Representatives for Senator Hale." Her pulse kicked hard. "I'm not interested. It's in your interest to hear us out." The younger man gave the door a light tap with 2 fingers. Friendly, impatient. Emily should have ignored them. She knew that. But fear had a way of dressing itself up as politeness, and politeness had nearly ruined more women than violence ever needed to. She opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. "What do you want?" The older man smiled in a way that made the hallway colder. "Just to clear up a misunderstanding before it turns into something unfortunate." He held up a document folder so she could see the official-looking letterhead. "Your little incident with Miss Hale has been misrepresented online. We'd appreciate your cooperation in correcting the record." Emily did not move. "What record?" "A statement," he said smoothly. "You would confirm that you were confrontational with Miss Hale and that Mr. Moretti escalated an otherwise minor disagreement." Emily let out a short, incredulous breath. "She spat on me." The man's smile dimmed but did not vanish. "Teenagers can be emotional. The important thing is preventing this from damaging respectable people." "Respectable." Emily looked at the folder, then back at his face. "No." The younger man's expression hardened first. "Maybe read it before you decide." "I already decided." She started to close the door. His hand shot out and caught it before it latched. Not enough force to slam it open, enough to remind her how easily he could. "Ms. Carter," he said, dropping the polite voice, "nobody's asking you to do anything complicated." The hallway seemed to shrink. Emily pushed against the door. "Take your hand off it." Instead, he shoved harder, snapping the chain free from its weak screws with one brutal crack. Emily stumbled backward. The older man stepped in first as if they had been invited. Fear turned clean and sharp in her chest. "You need to leave," she said. "Sign the paper," the older man replied. The younger one moved closer. "You really want to be the waitress who starts a war she can't survive." Emily backed toward the kitchenette, fingers searching behind her on instinct for anything heavy. Then all 3 of them heard the elevator at the end of the hall open. The older man went still. So did the younger one. Footsteps crossed the hall, slow, unhurried, expensive soles on cheap carpet. Vincent Moretti came through the open doorway like he had every right to enter any room he chose. Nico was a step behind him. Neither man looked rushed. That made it worse. Vincent's gaze landed first on the broken chain hanging from Emily's door, then on the 2 men inside her apartment, then on Emily herself standing small and furious by the kitchenette with one hand white-knuckled around the handle of a frying pan she must have grabbed without thinking. His eyes darkened. No one spoke. Then Vincent said very quietly, "You broke her door." The older man recovered enough to clear his throat. "Mr. Moretti, this is a private matter." Vincent walked farther into the room. "Private matters usually happen in private," he said. "Not in a woman's apartment at 8 in the morning after you force your way inside." The younger man tried bravado and failed halfway through it. "We're here on behalf of Senator Hale." "I know exactly whose dogs you are," Vincent said. Emily had never heard a voice stay so calm while stripping skin from people. The older man glanced toward the door, calculating distance, consequence, pride. "No one wants this to become ugly." Vincent stopped in the center of the room. "Then leave before it becomes honest." Nico closed the apartment door behind him with a soft click. That sound broke whatever nerve the younger man had left. He stepped back first. The older one held on a second longer, then tucked the folder under his arm and tried to recover some dignity. Ms. Carter would be wise to remember who holds power in this city. Vincent's mouth shifted, not quite a smile. "Say that again," he said, "and I'll assume you're asking me to answer it." The two men left. They did not look at Emily on the way out. The front door shut behind them. The apartment shrank into silence. Emily lowered the frying pan slowly. Her hand was shaking. Vincent looked at it. Then at the broken chain. Then at the thin lock, the drafty window. The room that had barely enough space for one person to feel safe in. "You live here alone?" he asked. Emily hated how small the place looked with him in it. "Yes." His gaze returned to her face. "Not tonight." She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "You don't get to make decisions for me just because you like the sound of your own voice." Vincent stepped closer. "No," he said. "I make them because the men who just broke into your apartment will be back with worse ideas. I can call the police. By the time they file the report, Hale's people will have another statement drafted and another lie ready for the cameras." Emily swallowed anger because the fear underneath it was stronger. "How did you know they were here?" Vincent did not answer immediately. "Nico did. We had eyes on the building." Emily turned to him. "You had what?" Vincent's gaze never left hers. "You were not walking home alone for no reason." That should have made her furious. Maybe some part of it did. But right then, all she could feel was the aftershock of the broken chain and the certainty that if he had not come when he did, the morning would have ended very differently. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, though the words had lost conviction. Vincent looked around the apartment one more time, taking in the old radiator, the tiny sink, the door that no longer locked properly. "Yes," he said. "You are." And this time standing there in the cold gray light with her ruined lock and Hale's men still fresh in the hallway, Emily did not have enough certainty left to tell him no. And with the chain hanging broken from the door and the last of her certainty still trembling in her hands, Emily did the one thing she had spent most of her life refusing to do. She let someone help her, not gracefully, not with trust, not even with anything close to peace. She grabbed her purse, her phone charger, a clean sweater from the chair by the bed, and the small canvas tote she used for groceries. That was all. It took less than 2 minutes to gather the evidence of how little of her life felt worth packing. Vincent waited near the door without rushing her. Nico stood in the hall and gave her the privacy of looking anywhere but at her. When Emily stepped out, Vincent closed the apartment behind her and handed a card to the superintendent, who had finally emerged from the stairwell in a panic. "Replace the lock and frame before noon," Vincent said. "Bill this number." The man nodded too quickly. Emily did not ask what kind of card it was, or what kind of man could make a stranger shake with gratitude for being told to fix a tenant's door. She was too tired to ask the questions that would have mattered on another day. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. She was aware of Vincent beside her without looking at him, aware of the clean scent of his coat, the stillness in him, the sense that he occupied silence, the way other men occupied space. Her pulse had not fully come down. Every few seconds she flexed the fingers that had gripped the frying pan, and felt the ghost of fear still lodged in her palm. Outside the city wore the pale, hard face of winter morning. The black SUV waited at the curb engine, running heat already working against the cold. Nico opened the rear door. Emily hesitated just long enough to feel foolish for hesitating, then got in. Vincent slid in beside her. The door shut. The city disappeared behind tinted glass. For the first few blocks, no one spoke. Traffic crept through downtown under a low, white sky. Pedestrians bent into the wind. Steam rose from street grates and drifted sideways. Emily watched Chicago move as if through water and tried not to think about the fact that she was in a car with a man most people only named quietly. She looked down at her hands. The cuff of her sweater had ridden back again. Her wrist still showed the fading remains of Tyler's bruises and the fresh red imprint where one of Hale's men had grabbed the door. Vincent noticed. "Did he touch you?" It was such a simple question. That was what made it hard. "He grabbed the door," Emily said. Vincent waited, and my arm, for a second. The muscle in his jaw moved once. "Which one?" Emily glanced at him. "Does that matter?" "Yes." She looked back out the window. "The younger one." No answer came from him, only a silence that felt more deliberate than speech. Nico watched the road. "They won't be coming back." Emily almost laughed at that. Because men like that are known for respecting boundaries. Because they know whose line they crossed, Nico said. She turned that over in her mind and found no comfort in it. Men like Hale's aides scared her because they were ordinary enough to hide in daylight. Men like Vincent Moretti scared her because nobody expected them to hide at all. The SUV turned north, gliding through streets that grew cleaner, wider, quieter. By the time they pulled into the underground garage of a high-rise near the lake, Emily had gone from frightened to numb and back again. She followed Vincent through a private elevator lined in brushed steel that reflected all three of them in cold, distorted fragments. On the ride up, she caught sight of herself between him and Nico. Small, pale, carrying a grocery tote like it could anchor her to the version of her life she had just left. The elevator opened directly into Vincent's penthouse. Emily stepped into silence. Not the dead silence of emptiness. The expensive kind. Controlled. Intentioned. The kind that came from thick glass and thick walls, and the certainty that no one entered unless they were allowed. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a gray sweep of city and water. The skyline was all steel and distance. Inside, everything was clean lines and dark wood and soft, low light despite the morning. A grand piano stood near the windows like something out of another world. The furniture looked chosen by someone who trusted almost nothing but demanded excellence from what remained. Her boots clicked too loudly on the floor. "This is absurd," she said before she could stop herself. Vincent took off his coat. "It's secure." "That isn't what I meant." "I know." Nico disappeared down a side hallway with the ease of someone who knew the place as well as its owner. Emily remained where she was, tote hanging from one hand, feeling both underdressed and overexposed. Vincent crossed to a table by the entry, set down his keys, and turned to face her. "You'll stay in the guest room." "I didn't say yes to staying. You came here." "I came because 2 men broke into my apartment, and because you know they'll try again." Emily stared at him, anger rising partly because he was right, and partly because he never seemed to need anyone else to admit it. "You make everything sound like a fact." He met her gaze. "Some things are." She wanted to challenge that. Instead, she asked the question she had been holding since the hallway. "Do you follow all your waitresses home?" Something changed in his expression then. Not much. Just enough to let her know the question mattered. "You're the only one I've needed to." Emily hated the small, involuntary pull that line had on her. She looked away first. A woman in her 50s appeared from the far end of the apartment. Silver hair, pinned up, posture, straight eyes kind, but not soft. She wore black slacks and a cream blouse and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone impossible to rattle. "This is Angela," Vincent said. "She runs this house better than I ever could." Angela offered Emily a warm nod. "You look frozen." "Let's fix that." Within 10 minutes, Emily had been shown to a guest room larger than her whole apartment. Handed a cup of tea she did not remember agreeing to and told there were fresh towels in the bathroom. Angela never asked questions. That alone nearly made Emily trust her. The room held a bed dressed in white linen, a wool throw at the foot, and windows that turned the city into something almost beautiful. Emily set down her tote and sat carefully on the edge of the mattress as if the room might reject her weight. Her phone buzzed in her purse. 29 notifications now. She looked at the screen and nearly wished she had not. News alerts, social media tags, unknown numbers. A text from Ava asking why a local station was using a photo of Emily outside Rosie's from 6 months ago, one where she was carrying trash bags to the alley in a stained apron and looked exhausted enough to cry. Emily typed fast. "I'm okay. Don't answer anyone. Don't post anything." Ava replied immediately. "Where are you?" Emily looked around the room. The answer felt too strange to send. "Safe," she wrote. It was almost true. When she came back downstairs, showered, and wearing a soft charcoal sweater Angela had quietly left for her on the bed, Vincent was in the kitchen at the far end of the main living space. The sight of him there unsettled her in a different way than the diner ever had. A man like that belonged in danger, in shadow, in rumors told with lowered voices, not with his sleeves rolled up, a mug in one hand, sunlight dim on the side of his face. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toasted bread. "You should eat," he said without turning. Emily leaned against the doorway. "Do you ever ask instead of ordering?" "Number." A corner of her mouth almost moved. "That must be exhausting for everyone around you." "It saves time." A plate sat waiting on the island, eggs, toast, fruit, more food than she usually ate before noon in a week. Emily had not realized she was hungry until the smell hit her and her stomach tightened hard enough to hurt. She took the stool farthest from him. Vincent set a mug of coffee in front of her. Black for him, cream and sugar for her. She looked at the cup, then at him. "How did you know? You always take 2 sugars on Thursdays after 9. That startled her more than it should have. "You noticed that." "I notice a lot." Yes, Emily thought. That had become impossible to deny. For a while, only the soft clink of silverware filled the room. Emily took a cautious bite of toast, then another, and stopped pretending she was not hungry. Vincent watched once briefly, as if confirming something, then glanced toward a tablet open on the counter. "What is that?" she asked. He rotated the screen toward her. Her appetite vanished. A news segment played beneath a banner that read, "Local waitress tied to mob figure in diner altercation." The footage had been cut so tightly it almost looked like another event. Madison's sharp words were gone. The spit was gone. Emily's stillness was gone. All that remained was Vincent stepping toward the booth and Madison shrinking back while a reporter with perfect hair spoke solemnly about intimidation and public safety. Below the video, a still photo showed Emily in profile with her mouth open mid-sentence, easy to read as hostility if you wanted it to be. Emily set down the fork. They edited it. Yes. They cut out everything. Yes. Her own voice came out thin. "How many people have seen this?" Vincent reached over and muted the segment before the reporter could say her name again. "Enough." She stared at the frozen frame. "My sister saw it." Then she also saw the lie. "That doesn't stop people from believing it." "No," he said, "it doesn't." He opened another file. Screenshots now. Posts from local political accounts, clipped videos, comments crawling beneath them like insects. One post quoted a campaign spokesperson saying Senator Charles Hale was deeply concerned by the harassment his daughter had endured at the hands of a disturbed service worker apparently connected to known criminal elements. Emily read the words twice. "Disturbed," she said, almost laughing. "That's elegant." Vincent's gaze was on her, not the screen. "They're trying to define you before you speak." Her eyes burned. "I didn't do anything." "I know." The bluntness of it landed harder than comfort should have. Not sympathy. Not pity. Certainty. Emily pushed the tablet away. "Then why do I feel like I'm disappearing all over again?" Vincent leaned one hand on the island between them. "Because they're used to people like you being easy to erase." Something in her flared. Not just hurt. Anger finally warming enough to move. "People like me." He did not retreat from the mistake. Working women. Women without lawyers on speed dial and publicists to clean their blood off the floor. The kitchen went quiet. Emily looked down at the grain of the marble beneath her hand. "You say things like that as if you aren't one of the people this city bends around." "I am one of the reasons it bends," he said. She looked up sharply. There it was again. That brutal honesty that made him seem at once safer and more dangerous than anyone who pretended to be clean. "Then why help me?" she asked. "Really?" Vincent was silent for a moment. Beyond the windows, the lake was a sheet of cold pewter under the clouds. "When I was 11, he said, at last, my mother cleaned houses on the North Shore. Big houses. The kind with 6 bathrooms and women who complained if the silver was arranged wrong. One of them threw a drink at her because she thought a table had been scratched. My mother apologized." Emily did not move. Vincent looked not at her, but through the glass into something older. She apologized because she needed the money and because some humiliations are cheaper to survive than to fight. I watched it happen. I remember thinking that if I ever grew into a man with any reach at all, I would never stand in a room again and watch a woman be treated like that for someone else's amusement. He turned back to her. I kept that promise. Emily had no answer ready for that. None that did not feel too small. She looked at the tablet again. Madison's frozen face. Her own. The narrative already hardening around them. "Then don't fix it for me," Emily said quietly. "Not by yourself." Vincent's eyes narrowed just slightly. Meaning if my face is out there, then my voice goes with it. She swallowed. "I'm not hiding in here while everyone else decides what happened." For the first time since she had met him, something like approval moved through his expression. It was not warm, exactly. It was worse than warmth. It was respect. "Good," he said. That one word changed the air between them. Nico entered from the hall with a phone in one hand and a file tucked under his arm. He looked from Vincent to Emily and seemed to understand instantly that something had shifted. "We got the diner feed," he said. Vincent took the file. Complete. Inside angles and counter camera. Clear enough to make Saints blush. Emily stood from the stool. "I want to see it." Nico glanced at Vincent. Vincent said, "Show her." The footage was worse than memory. Rosie's from the mounted corner angle looked smaller, sadder, more exposed. Emily watched herself move through the room, carrying plates, smiling automatically, living an ordinary shift she had believed no one important would ever see. She watched Madison's mouth twist, watched the phone rise, watched her own body hold still under the insult. Then the spit. Visible. Undeniable. The laughter. The way the whole room recoiled without intervening. Vincent rising from the back booth. Emily gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles went pale. "That's enough," Vincent said quietly. "It's not," she answered. The footage continued. Madison apologizing. Vincent stepping back. Emily standing there with her face still bright with humiliation and disbelief. Nico shut the laptop. The room remained silent a beat too long. "They did this to other girls," Emily said, remembering Rosie's story. Nico nodded. "We're finding clips." Vincent closed the file. "Hale wants to make this about me. He's hoping fear muddies the facts." Emily looked at him. "And does it?" His mouth shifted. Usually. She believed that. More importantly, so did he. Later that afternoon, Vincent took her back to Rosie's. She did not agree immediately. The idea of walking back through those doors with every nerve stripped raw made her stomach tighten. But hiding in the penthouse while the city made a story out of her felt worse. So she changed into her own jeans, borrowed a wool coat from Angela, and rode downtown beside Vincent with her shoulders square and her heart behaving badly in her chest. Rosie's looked exactly the same from the curb, neon in the window, salt tracked in by boots, same chipped sign over the pie case. But when Vincent entered beside her, the room changed the same way it had the night before. Not louder, quieter. More dangerous because everyone understood all at once that they were seeing something they would later repeat to other people as proof of the world being stranger than they thought. Rosie stared from behind the register, then looked only at Emily. "You okay?" Emily nodded. "I am now." That was only half true, but it was enough. They took the back booth. Not because Vincent needed the corner. Because it was the table where he always sat, and Emily understood suddenly that fear lived in rituals as much as comfort did. A young waitress named Claire approached them with a coffee pot in both hands. She could not have been more than 19. Freckles, nervous smile, eyes darting once to Vincent and then away. He softened his voice by a degree. "Take your time." Claire poured too much into his cup and nearly missed the saucer. Emily reached out instinctively to steady the pot. Their fingers brushed. Claire looked at her with something between awe and sympathy. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered. Emily gave the smallest shake of her head. "You didn't do anything." Claire looked as if that answer hurt. Around them, conversation resumed in patches. A man at the counter stole glances in the chrome napkin holder. Two women by the window bent over one phone. Somewhere near the kitchen, a plate slipped and cracked. Vincent watched the room the way other men read newspapers. "You like this?" Emily said under her breath. "What?" Being understood without having to explain yourself. He looked at her, then one brow lifting slightly. "Would you prefer I wasn't?" She surprised herself by smiling. "I'm not sure yet." Coffee arrived. So did pie. Neither of them had ordered because Rosie had sent it over, and pretending otherwise would have been ridiculous. Emily wrapped both hands around her mug and let the heat ground her. For 10 whole minutes, nothing terrible happened. Then her phone lit up on the table. Tyler Boone. The name hit first in her stomach, then in her throat. Vincent noticed her change before he saw the screen. "Who?" Emily turned the phone face down. "No one." His gaze held. She exhaled. "My ex." The word tasted old and ugly. The phone started ringing again. Vincent did not reach for it. He simply waited. Emily declined the call. A text arrived immediately after. "Saw the news. Thought you loved attention, but this is a new low." Her face went cold. Another text. "You with him now?" She put the phone in her pocket. "Does he know where you are?" Vincent asked. "Number." Emily wanted that to be true enough to make it useful. Outside, traffic moved through dirty snow under the darkening sky. Inside, Rosie's carried on around them. Coffee, pie, whispering, fear. Familiar things rearranged into a new shape by one public humiliation and the man who refused to let it stand. Emily looked down at the spoon beside her plate, at her own reflection warped in the metal, and for the first time in a very long time she did not see a woman fading quietly into the background. She saw the outline of someone being dragged into the light, whether she wanted it or not. Dragged into the light was one thing. Standing still inside it was another. By the time Emily and Vincent left Rosie's, the sky had already gone dark. Snowmelt shone on the pavement in long, dirty streaks under the street lamps, and the city had that strange, frozen energy. It got after sunset in winter, all motion and glass and impatience. People kept living. Cabs kept honking. Doors kept opening and closing. Somewhere music leaked from a bar entrance and vanished into the cold. It felt offensive almost that the world had room to remain ordinary while her face moved across screens she could not control. She rode back to the penthouse in silence, one hand wrapped around her phone inside her coat pocket, as if pressure alone could stop it from lighting up again. It did not. When they reached the private elevator, she looked at the screen and saw 3 more texts from Tyler. "So it is true. Knew you would end up with somebody like that. You think he can erase where you came from?" Emily deleted none of them. She only locked the phone and stepped into the elevator beside Vincent. He did not ask this time. He had already read enough in her face. When the doors opened into the apartment, Angela was waiting by the kitchen with a look that meant she had seen trouble before and knew exactly how far politeness should stretch around it. "There's soup on the stove," she said to Emily. "Then to Vincent Nico's in your office." Vincent nodded. Emily set her coat on the back of a chair and stood there a moment, not sure whether to follow him or make herself scarce. Old habits told her to become less visible the minute powerful men needed a room. But old habits had not protected her lately. Vincent paused at the edge of the hallway and looked back. "Come with me." It was not a command this time. It only sounded like one because his voice had been built for doors opening. His office faced the lake. Dark shelves. One low lamp. A broad desk with almost nothing on it except a leather folder, a glass of water, and Nico leaning over a laptop with his sleeves rolled to the forearms. He looked up when Emily entered and gave her a small nod, respectful and unsurprised. "Sorry," Nico said. "It's moving fast." Emily stepped closer. "What is—" Nico turned the screen toward them. Senator Charles Hale stood behind a bank of microphones outside some government building, downtown, blue flag over one shoulder, expression arranged into practiced regret. Madison stood beside him in a cream coat, eyes red in a way that looked expensive and rehearsed. Reporters shouted questions that the video had not fully caught. The caption along the bottom of the clip was enough. "Senator Hale calls for investigation after daughter threatened at diner." Emily felt something go tight beneath her ribs. The reporter's voice sharpened through the speakers. "Senator Hale has condemned what he called a coordinated intimidation effort involving known organized crime figures and a local waitress believed to have harassed his daughter before the incident at Rosie's all-night grill." Emily gave a disbelieving laugh that hurt on the way out. "Harassed her." Hale's voice cut in smooth with outrage. "My daughter is a young woman who was publicly humiliated and frightened by dangerous individuals who think fear is a substitute for decency. We will be cooperating fully with law enforcement." Vincent reached past Nico and stopped the video. The room went quiet. Nico exhaled slowly. "He's not backing off." "No," Vincent said. "He's committing." Emily stared at the frozen image of Madison's carefully wounded face. "How can he say that when there's footage?" "Because most people will never see the full footage unless it is put in front of them first," Vincent said. She folded her arms tight across her stomach. "So put it in front of them." Nico looked at Vincent. Vincent looked at her. "I will," he said. Emily's jaw tightened. "Not without me." The men in the room seemed to understand that this was not about permission. Vincent spoke first. "You being visible changes the risk." "I'm already visible." "That isn't what I mean." Emily stepped closer to the desk. "Then say what you mean." His eyes held hers. "I mean, once you speak publicly beside me, there is no version of this where you go back to being anonymous." She almost said anonymous had never protected her anyway. Instead, she looked at the screen again at the version of herself already being written by other people. "They used my silence before I even made a choice," she said. "I'm not giving them more of it." Nico leaned back from the desk and crossed his arms. That'll make the room louder. Emily turned to him. Good. A faint shift touched the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. I like her. You work for him, Emily said. Your standards are probably warped. Nico glanced at Vincent. They are. For a second, despite everything, the room loosened. Then Emily's phone rang. All three of them looked down. Tyler. She rejected the call. It came again immediately. Vincent did not move, but something in him changed all at once. His stillness deepened. Answer it, he said. Emily stared. Absolutely not. Put it on speaker. She should have refused. Every sane instinct told her not to let Tyler's voice inside this apartment, not here, not in front of Vincent, not where old humiliations and new ones might touch. But another part of her was tired of fear making choices before she had time to. She accepted the call and held the phone on the desk between them. Emily. Tyler's voice came through, already angry, already too loud. So now you screen me. What do you want? A sharp laugh. Wanted to hear whether your voice sounds different now that you've got a gangster doing your talking. Emily closed her hand into a fist at her side. I'm not discussing this with you. No, you don't discuss anything, remember. You disappear, then pop up all over the news like some kind of victim. You always did love acting like the whole world was happening to you. Nico's face went expressionless in the way of men who had learned to hide their reactions because showing them made things worse. Vincent said nothing. Emily forced her voice to stay level. Do not call me again. Oh, so that's it. You get one rich psycho to look at you and now you forget who kept a roof over your head. The lie hit the room and died there. Emily felt heat flash up her throat. You did not keep anything over my head. Tyler laughed again, crueler now because he had heard the anger. There she is. Knew you still had a mouth in there somewhere. Vincent held out his hand. Emily looked at him, then gave him the phone. Vincent lifted it to his ear. His voice, when he spoke, was so calm it made the air around them sharpen. You do not call this number again. There was silence on the line, then a nervous scoff. Who the hell are you? The man who is going to make your life very small if I hear your voice in her direction again. Tyler tried for defiance and missed. She can answer her own phone. Vincent's eyes never left Emily's face. She did. Now I am. A beat passed. Then Tyler, trying to recover himself, said, You think I'm scared of you? Vincent ended the call. He handed the phone back to Emily. That was rude, Nico said mildly. Vincent ignored him. Emily stared at the dark screen. Her pulse was uneven. Tyler had frightened her so many times in rooms much smaller than this one. He had done it with volume and nearness and the certainty that she would apologize for making him angry. Hearing his voice shrink under somebody else's silence should not have felt the way it did. She hated how much relief resembled weakness when it arrived. Vincent returned his attention to the desk. We go public tonight. Nico straightened. Live? Yes. Emily looked up. Tonight. Hale has committed to his version, Vincent said. Every hour that passes lets it harden. The office suddenly felt too warm. I'm not ready. No, he said. You're frightened. She stared at him. He did not soften the truth. And you can do frightened, he added. That should have made her angry. It did. It also steadied something in her. Nico closed the laptop and picked up the folder. I'll prep the clips and clear the feed. When he left, the office seemed larger and more private than before. Emily remained by the desk phone in one hand, the city dim through the glass behind Vincent's shoulder. He walked around the desk, slowly stopping just close enough to make it impossible not to feel his presence. You do not owe me this, he said. Emily gave a short, dry laugh. That almost sounds generous. It is not generosity. What is it? It is choice. Something in her chest tightened unexpectedly. He looked at her as if this mattered more than the press conference, more than Hale, more than any move being made outside this room. If you walk out of here right now, he said, I will still make sure no one from Hale's office gets near you. I will still make sure your apartment is secure. I will still handle Tyler. You can take your sister and leave the city if that is what you want. Emily held very still. And if I stay, she said, then they hear your name from your own mouth. No one had offered her that in a long time. A real choice. Not pressure wearing a smile, not fear dressed as practicality. Choice. She looked past him, to the lake, to the hard, dark line of Chicago in winter, to the city that had watched her all week without knowing her at all. I'm staying, she said. Vincent's gaze dropped briefly to her mouth and came back up. Good. The word moved through her like heat under skin. The next hour passed in a strange blur of preparation and nerves. Angela brought tea and ignored the cables Nico ran across the office floor with the discretion of a woman who had seen far more dangerous things than camera equipment. A makeup artist did not appear. No publicist arrived with talking points. Vincent refused both. Instead, he sat Emily down at the small table by the windows and asked one question. What is true? She frowned. About what? About you. Emily almost laughed because no one ever asked that unless they were about to ignore the answer. Vincent waited. She looked down at her hands around the teacup. I work too much. I send money to my sister because if I don't, she says she's fine when she's not. I've spent years smiling at people who would not remember my face if I stopped showing up. I don't like asking for help because help usually comes with conditions. His expression did not change, but she saw him listening in the way he always did. Entirely. What else? She swallowed. I said no to a spoiled girl who thought my dignity came with the milkshake. His mouth shifted at that something fierce and brief. What else? Emily looked up at him. I'm angry. Good. I'm embarrassed. That isn't yours to carry. The answer came so quickly it almost undid her. She set the cup down before her hands could give her away. By the time Nico announced that the feed was ready, Emily felt less prepared and more certain. Maybe that was all courage ever was, not feeling safe, feeling claimed by your own voice before fear could borrow it. Vincent's office changed shape under the camera lights. The desk faced the windows now, the skyline stretched behind them in darkening blue and silver. Nico adjusted a lens, checked audio, and stepped back. Once we start, he said, there is no clean way to pull it back. Emily looked at the red light, waiting to blink alive. I know. Vincent took the chair beside her, not behind the desk, but next to it. Not shielding her, not placing himself in front. Beside. That mattered. Nico counted them in with 2 fingers lifted, then lowered his hand. The red light came on. For half a second, all Emily heard was her own pulse. Vincent began. This city has spent 2 days listening to a lie, because the man telling it has a title in front of his name. His voice was low, measured, impossible to interrupt. He did not rush. He did not posture. He looked directly into the camera like he was speaking to one person at a time and daring each of them to look away. A young woman did her job in a diner. Another young woman spat in her face for it while friends recorded the moment for entertainment. When the truth threatened a political career, the lie arrived right on schedule. He paused, just long enough to let the words settle. Senator Charles Hale wants this story to be about me because he thinks fear is easier to sell than evidence. Nico tapped once on the keyboard. On a screen just beyond the camera, the full unedited diner footage appeared in the live stream feed beside them. Madison's face. The spit. The laughter. The room freezing. Vincent standing. No edits. No mercy. Vincent did not look at the monitor. You can watch it yourselves. Emily kept her eyes forward. She had already seen enough of her own humiliation for one lifetime. Vincent continued. He called her unstable. He called me coercive. He called this intimidation. What it is and what it has always been is a powerful man panicking because his daughter treated a working woman like something disposable in public and got caught. The camera did not move. Nico knew what he was doing. Vincent turned slightly toward Emily. My name means a lot of things in this city, he said. For once, let hers mean something first. It was her turn. Emily drew one breath, then another. When she spoke, her voice trembled only on the first sentence. My name is Emily Carter. She saw her own hands and the lower edge of the monitor resting flat on the desk. Good. Still, I have worked since I was 16 years old. I have cleaned tables, closed kitchens, carried trays on sprained ankles, and smiled through insults because rent does not care whether your pride is hurt. The trembling was gone now. 2 nights ago, I told an 18-year-old girl I could not serve her alcohol. She insulted me, recorded me, and spat in my face because she thought there would be no consequence. She was right about one thing. Nobody else in that room moved. The words hung in the office. Emily looked straight at the lens. I did not harass anyone. I did not threaten anyone. I did not ask for any of this attention. I said no to a girl who believes workers exist to absorb whatever cruelty money buys. Nico's eyes flicked up from the laptop, then back down. Emily felt heat in her face, but it no longer resembled shame. When Senator Hale's people came to my apartment this morning and tried to force me to sign a false statement that was not about protecting his daughter, it was about protecting his image. Vincent's head turned sharply toward her. That detail had not been in the plan. She knew. She kept going anyway. "They broke my door," she said. "They entered my home. They expected me to be afraid enough to help them lie. I am tired of being treated like fear is the same thing as obedience." Something in the room changed. Nico looked at Vincent once. Vincent gave the smallest nod. Another set of files began populating the stream. Photos of the broken chain. Screenshots of incoming calls. Time-stamped messages from Hale staffers that Nico had somehow gotten hold of in the last hour. Emily did not know how. She did not ask. She only spoke. "I know what people like them count on. They count on women like me being too ashamed to say what happened. Too tired. Too poor. Too easy to discredit. That only works if we keep helping them." Her throat tightened not with fear now, but with the force of the truth finally reaching air. "I'm done helping." Silence. A city's worth of silence on the other side of the camera, impossible to hear but somehow present. Vincent leaned slightly toward the microphone. "If Senator Hale or anyone working for him comes near Emily Carter again," he said softly, "then this conversation stops being public and becomes personal." Nico winced. "There it is," he muttered under his breath, not enough for the feed to catch. Emily almost smiled. The absurdity of it, the terror, and the strange, quiet strength sitting beside her. Vincent did not stop there. Nico triggered another release. Old clips surfaced in real time, split screens appearing in the stream and beginning to spread outward across the internet. Madison laughing while a busboy with broken English stood confused in a service alley. Madison and two friends mocking a coat check girl at a fundraiser. Text messages from campaign staff discussing containing the Waitress before the story spread. Fragments of rot with the money scrubbed off. The feed ran for 12 minutes. When Nico finally cut it, the red light died and the office returned all at once to itself. Quiet. Lake. Breath. Pulse. Emily had not realized how hard her body had been holding until everything stopped. The first tremor hit her hands, then her shoulders. "It's done," Nico said softly, already staring at the analytics rising like a storm on his screen. "God help him." Vincent stood first. Emily remained seated because her knees seemed to have temporarily lost interest in being useful. She looked at the dead camera, then at the city, then finally up at Vincent. "What happens now?" He came around the desk and stopped in front of her. "Now," he said, "they stop speaking for you." She searched his face for triumph and found something else. Pride. Yes. Anger still banked beneath the surface, but also a kind of brutal tenderness she did not know what to do with. Nico's phone started vibrating almost immediately. Then Vincent's, then Emily's. No one answered any of them. Nico looked at his screen and let out a low breath. "It's moving." Emily stood because she had to stand or she would fold in on herself from the pressure of everything she had just said. "I need air," she whispered. Vincent followed her to the windows but did not crowd her. Below, the city looked unchanged, which felt impossible. Traffic still moved. Lights still burned. Somewhere in all those buildings, people were hearing her voice and having to put it next to the lie they had already accepted. Her reflection in the glass looked like someone she almost knew. Pale, tired eyes, too bright but upright. "I wasn't shaking," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "Number." Emily laughed once, shaky and real. "I thought I would." "You did after." She turned to look at him. "You noticed that too." "I notice a lot." There was no room left in the moment for pretending not to understand what moved between them. Too much had burned away. Fear, distance, the illusion that he was only some dark shape passing through her life. Emily stepped closer before she could think herself out of it. Vincent's eyes dropped to her mouth and stayed there only a second before returning to her face. He did not touch her. He did not move first. For all his certainty, for all his power, he waited. That was what undid her, not the way he protected, the way he stopped. Emily rose onto her toes and kissed him. It was not tentative. It was not careful. It tasted like adrenaline and coffee and all the words she had swallowed in other rooms for other men who never earned them. Vincent's hand came to the side of her neck with devastating restraint, not claiming, not forcing, only anchoring her there, while the kiss deepened and the city beyond the glass disappeared entirely. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing harder than they had been during the live stream. Emily's forehead rested briefly against his chest because the world needed 1 second to settle before she could face it again. Vincent tipped her chin up with 2 fingers. That he said, voice roughened at the edges now, was your choice too. Emily looked straight into his eyes. Yes. For the first time since she had met him, his control actually slipped enough to show. Not much. Just a flash. Hunger. Relief. Something darker and more dangerous because it had been kept on a leash so long. Then Nico cleared his throat from behind the desk with all the timing of a man who hated interrupting but preferred survival. Not to ruin the mood, he said, but Hale's office is imploding in public, and he's not going to go quietly. Emily stepped back slowly, pulse still climbing in strange new directions. Nico turned the screen toward them. The numbers were rising too fast to count cleanly. Shares, comments, news pickups. Clips of the full diner footage flooding feeds that had only hours earlier carried the edited version. A local columnist had already posted that Hale's statement now looked less like concern and more like a coordinated smear. A second account had reposted the broken lock photos. A third had identified one of Hale's aides entering Emily's building that morning from private security footage across the street. The truth was moving. So was the fallout. Nico's phone buzzed again. He checked it, then looked up. Hale's legal team is in crisis mode, he said, and Madison's friends are starting to save themselves. Emily let out a slow breath. Good. Vincent's gaze stayed on the screen, unreadable again, now that the moment at the window had passed into something quieter and more dangerous. He'll hit back, he said. Emily looked at him. I know. And she did know now. Not as theory, as weather, as the next pressure front moving in over the city. But fear did not feel the same after speaking. That night, long after Nico disappeared into the office again and Angela quietly left food. Neither of them touched. Emily stood alone in the guest room with the lights off and her phone in her hand. Ava had sent 6 messages in a row, half terrified and half proud. Rosie had texted 3 words. That's my girl. Unknown numbers kept coming, some supportive, some ugly, some threatening in the polished language of people who thought they had never learned to sound afraid. Emily set the phone down and pressed her palm to the cool glass. Far below, Chicago kept burning with its 1,000 indifferent lights. Behind her in another room, Vincent Moretti was still awake, still moving pieces she could not yet see. And for the first time, Emily understood that standing beside a man like him did not just mean being protected. It meant being impossible to return from. Impossible to return from was one way to describe it. Another was freedom with a pulse. Emily did not sleep much that night. The city kept glowing beyond the guest room windows, and every time she closed her eyes, she felt the weight of the camera, heard her own voice saying, I am done helping. Felt again the precise, devastating restraint in Vincent when he let her come to him instead of taking what he wanted just because he could. By 3 a.m, she gave up on rest, wrapped herself in the robe Angela had left on the bed, and sat by the window with her phone face down on the nightstand. When dawn finally bled pale over the lake, Chicago looked washed raw. Clean light over dirty streets. Smoke lifting from rooftops. The whole city wearing the sort of mourning that made people believe truth might have a chance if it got there early enough. Her phone had other ideas. By 6:30, there were more than 100 notifications. By 7, local stations were replaying clips from the live stream beside headlines that no longer sounded so certain of Senator Hale's innocence. Commentators who had repeated the first lie now spoke in careful, revised tones. One anchor called the footage troubling. Another used the phrase deeply disturbing. The language of retreat had already begun. That did not mean mercy. Emily scrolled through messages with growing steadiness. Some were ugly in familiar ways. Gold digger, mob girl, attention addict. Others came from strangers who sounded like they knew the shape of her humiliation because they had survived their own versions of it behind counters in back offices, on loading docks, in kitchens where supervisors laughed and nobody wrote anything down. My manager threw a milkshake at me in college and I never told anyone. I worked coat check at a hotel downtown and girls like that treated us like furniture. Thank you for saying it out loud. Emily sat very still after reading those. For years, she had thought silence made her smaller in a way that kept her safe. This felt different. Not safe. Not small, either. A soft knock came at the open door. Angela stood there with a tray, coffee toast, sliced pear. You should eat before the day decides what kind it plans to be, Angela said. Emily gave a tired smile. Is that one of Vincent's philosophies? Angela stepped inside and set the tray down. No. He would make it sound more threatening. That drew a real laugh from Emily, brief but real all the same. Angela looked at her a second longer. You did well last night? Emily's fingers curled around the warm mug. I was terrified. Courage usually arrives wearing that coat. After Angela left, Emily dressed in the clothes she had worn the day before and went downstairs. Voices drifted from the office. Nico's lower and faster than usual. Vincent's calm in a way that told her the pressure had increased, not eased. She stopped in the doorway. Vincent stood by the desk with one hand in his pocket jacket already on tie, dark against a white shirt. Nico had 2 phones going at once and a laptop open with news feeds tiled across the screen. On one channel, Senator Hale's campaign office was visible behind a pack of reporters. On another, a legal analyst was discussing potential exposure if any of the intimidation claims could be substantiated. Vincent looked up first. There it was again, that brief change in his face when his eyes landed on her. Not softness exactly. Recognition. Possession without insult. As if whatever else the day demanded it had to answer to the fact that she had walked into the room. You should have slept more, he said. Emily leaned against the frame. You too. I'll sleep when the city runs out of liars. Nico glanced between them and decided not to comment. Hale's team is trying to push criminal charges through, he said instead. Blackmail, conspiracy, coercion. They're throwing words fast and hoping one sticks before noon. Emily stepped farther in. Against me. Yes, Vincent said. The words should have frozen her. Instead, they lit something colder. Does he actually have anything? No, Nico said. That is not the same thing as not trying. Vincent turned one of the monitors toward her. The district attorney's office had not confirmed anything. Hale's camp was leaking claims to reporters, first hoping the accusation itself would do the damage. Emily read the scrolling headline once and set her jaw. He still thinks I scare easy. Vincent's gaze stayed on her face. He has spent his whole life believing women in aprons are built to fold. Then he's going to have a disappointing morning. A shadow of approval crossed Nico's expression. Vincent picked up a folder from the desk and handed it to her. Inside were printed copies of the broken lock photos, time-stamped images from the security camera across the street from her apartment building. Screenshots of campaign messages Nico had somehow unearthed, and statements from 2 former service workers Madison Hale had humiliated in previous incidents. One had been the dishwasher Rosie mentioned. The other was a coat check attendant from a fundraiser at the Palmer House. Her statement was short and furious and perfectly clear. Emily looked up. They agreed to go on record. They agreed to stop protecting people who never protected them, Vincent said. That line sat with her. Nico answered one of his phones, listened, then muted the call and looked at Vincent. Press conference at 11. Hale's trying to get in front of it. Vincent nodded once. Emily closed the folder. Then we go too. Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. This won't be from a desk and a camera. I know. There will be reporters in your face. Questions with knives in them. Men who smiled while calling you unstable 12 hours ago. Emily met his stare without blinking, then let them ask. He watched her long enough that the silence became its own test. Then he said, "Get your coat." The courthouse plaza downtown had been turned into a stage by the time their car arrived. Camera crews lined the sidewalk behind metal barricades. Reporters in wool coats and polished boots clustered around temporary podiums, while aides hurried between them with clipped voices and frozen expressions. Police kept the path clear, but not clear enough to hide the appetite in the crowd. Public ruin attracted people. Respectability shattering in daylight attracted them more. Inside the SUV, Emily felt the old instinct rise. Make yourself small. Lower your eyes. Survive the moment by shrinking inside it. Beside her, Vincent sat with one hand resting loose on his knee, composed as ever. You stay close to me, he said. Emily almost smiled. That sounded suspiciously like an order. It was. She looked out at the camera flashes. I'll manage. His head turned slightly. I know you will. Stay close anyway. Nico in the front seat muttered something in Italian that sounded approving and resigned at the same time. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. This time Emily did not hesitate. She stepped out beside Vincent, and the whole plaza reacted at once. Shouts, questions, her name thrown from mouths that had never earned it. Vincent moved through the center of it with infuriating ease, not pushing, not hurrying, simply occupying enough gravity that the path made itself. Emily stayed at his side and kept her chin level, every nerve in her body bright and awake. "Emily, did you coordinate the release of those videos?" "Mr. Moretti, are you threatening a sitting senator?" "Emily, did Hale's staff contact you directly?" "Do you deny involvement with organized crime?" That one nearly made her laugh. At the top of the courthouse steps, Senator Charles Hale stood behind a bank of microphones in a navy overcoat, looking exactly the way powerful men always looked when they expected the world to remember their position before their behavior. Madison stood half a pace behind him in dark glasses, though the morning was overcast. Her mouth was set hard now. No tears, no performance. Maybe she had run out. Hale saw them coming, and the color changed in his face almost imperceptibly. Not fear, not yet. Calculation forced to update itself under pressure. He had already begun speaking. "Any suggestion that my office attempted to intimidate this young woman is categorically false," he was saying. "My family has been subjected to coordinated harassment by criminal interests with a vested stake in public chaos." The crowd shifted when Vincent and Emily stopped 10 feet from the podium. Every lens swung. Hale's gaze landed on Emily. "Miss Carter, if you have concerns, proper channels exist. Aligning yourself with men like this only makes your position more tragic." The patronizing softness in his voice almost obscured the contempt. Emily heard Rosie in her head. "Rich people confuse money with permission." She took one step forward before anyone could stop her. "No," she said. The single word carried farther than she expected. Hale faltered. Emily did not. "You do not get to call this tragic because I stopped being quiet." A wave moved through the press pack. Microphones angled toward her. Vincent remained where he was, not interrupting, not pulling her back. Hale attempted a pained smile. "This is not the place for theatrics." Emily felt something clean settle inside her. "You brought cameras," she said. "You made it the place." A few reporters lowered their eyes to hide smiles that were not supposed to show on camera. Hale straightened. "Miss Carter, my office has no record of any staff entering your building. You are repeating dangerous allegations fed to you by a man whose reputation speaks for itself." Nico, standing 2 steps behind Vincent, opened a folder and passed it forward. Vincent did not take it. Emily did. She pulled out the still images and held them up where the nearest cameras could catch the timestamps. "These are from the security camera across the street from my apartment," she said. "This is your aide Matthew Kessler entering my building yesterday at 8:11 in the morning. This is him leaving 13 minutes later after my door chain was broken." The press surged. Hale's expression flickered. "Those images could be manipulated," he said too quickly. Nico handed another page to Emily. She did not look back before taking it. "This is the invoice from the building superintendent for replacing the lock and frame. This is the report he signed with the time. If you want to say he manipulated that too, say it louder." Hale opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. A reporter shouted, "Senator, did your staff approach Miss Carter off the record?" Another, "Senator, are you denying the authenticity of the diner footage?" Another, "Is this the first complaint regarding your daughter's treatment of service employees?" Madison took one sharp step toward the microphones. "This is insane. She's lying." Emily turned her head and looked straight at her. "No," she said quietly. "I just stopped doing you the favor of being ashamed." Madison's face changed then. Not into remorse, into exposure. She looked younger all at once, stripped of angles, standing there in a coat that cost more than Emily's rent, trying to understand why her usual cruelty was not working. The crowd noise rose. Vincent stepped forward at last, not taking over the scene, but entering it with perfect timing. "Senator Hale," he said, "you built this morning because you believed she would come here frightened. That was your mistake." Hale's eyes cut to him. "And you think showing up with your people changes facts?" Vincent's expression remained unreadable. "No. Evidence changes facts. You should learn the difference before your attorneys explain it slowly." Nico pressed one button on his phone. Every major local outlet received the same release at the same second. Audio file, financial records, email chains. An internal message from Hale's campaign manager using the phrase "contain the waitress" before this gets out of hand. Another attachment linked construction donations routed through shell entities that Nico had been tracing for 24 hours without sleep. Phones in the press pool began vibrating almost at once. The shift was visible. Reporters looking down, eyes widening. A producer swearing softly near one of the cameras. Someone from a network affiliate turning away to speak urgently into an earpiece. Hale understood before anyone told him. The blood drained from his face. "You son of a bitch," he said, not quite into the microphone, not quite off it either. Vincent's mouth moved by a fraction. There it is. Chaos took the plaza. Questions came from every direction now. Not about Emily. About contracts, donors, staff intimidation, Madison's prior incidents. One reporter shouted whether the senator intended to resign. Another asked if he had misused campaign funds to settle complaints involving his daughter. Hale's aides moved in too late, hands out, voices straining. Emily stood in the middle of it with the wind cutting through her coat and felt an odd, almost holy distance settle over the whole scene. 2 days ago, she had been a waitress in a cracked vinyl booth with spit on her cheek and a room full of witnesses who preferred silence. Now the man who thought she could be pressed flat beneath his title was failing in public with all his power watching. Vincent touched the inside of her elbow. "Come on." She let him guide her back through the crowd, not because she needed rescue, but because the moment no longer belonged to Hale, and there was nothing left there for her to prove. Reporters shouted after them all the way to the car. Inside, the door shut. The noise dulled. Emily exhaled a breath she had not known she was holding. Nico got in front and closed his eyes for one brief second. "I may need 3 hours and a priest." Vincent looked at Emily instead. "You all right?" She turned to him. "I am now." This time it was true. By mid-afternoon, the city had turned. Not politely, not gradually, turned. Every channel carried some version of the same story. Hale's press conference backfiring, new records suggesting financial misconduct, eyewitness intimidation, past clips of Madison mocking workers. Commentators who once treated Emily like an unstable footnote now replayed her statement outside the courthouse with language like composure force and moral clarity. It felt strange to watch strangers discover her dignity as if it had just been invented. She sat in Vincent's office while Nico fielded calls and Angela brought late lunch. Nobody touched until she gave them the look that made obedience feel older than argument. Ava called, crying and laughing at once. "I saw you," she said. "Emily, I saw you. You looked like you belonged there." Emily looked out at the lake. "I belonged there because he lied there. You know that's not what I mean." Emily smiled into the phone. "I know." Rosie called next. "You coming back to work?" she asked, by way of hello. Emily laughed softly. "That's your first question." "No," Rosie said. "My first question was whether I needed to bring a bat downtown." Emily leaned back in the chair, warmth sliding into parts of her she had kept clenched for years. "I'm okay." "Good." Because the lunch crowd at the diner almost started a riot over whether we should charge more for pie now that we're famous. That made Emily close her eyes and laugh for real. By evening, the formal announcement came. Senator Charles Hale would step aside pending investigation. His campaign suspended operations. Donors fled in smooth public statements about accountability and concern. Madison's social media accounts vanished all at once as if shame had suddenly hired a team. The news should have felt triumphant. Instead, Emily mostly felt tired. Not empty. Just deeply, honestly tired. As if the body kept score in units more exact than emotion. She found Vincent alone near the windows after dark, jacket off tie, loosened one hand around a glass of whiskey he had not touched. The city reflected around him in panes of black glass and distant gold. "It's over," she said. He looked at her. "This part is..." Emily came to stand beside him. "You don't know how to leave anything without one last thread in it, do you?" "I know exactly how. I usually choose not to." She studied his profile. The hard line of his mouth, the stillness that always looked chosen, the man the city feared and the one who had stood in a diner and quietly cleaned spit from her skin like she deserved gentleness as much as vengeance. "What happens to me now?" she asked. He turned fully toward her then. "That depends," he said. "What do you want?" The question stopped her, not because she had no answer, because so few people had ever asked as if they would honor it. Emily looked beyond him down at the city. "I don't want to disappear again." "You won't. That isn't enough." His gaze stayed steady. "Then tell me the rest." She folded her arms against the chill of the glass. Rosie called. She joked about pie, but she also said the owner of the building next door has been trying to buy her out for years because the diner keeps bleeding money. She said after this week she doesn't know if she has the fight left to keep doing 12-hour shifts at her age. Vincent said nothing. He knew there was more. Emily drew a slow breath. I want that place to stay open. Not the way it was. Better. Brighter. Safer. I want girls behind the counter to know they can throw somebody out without losing rent money over it. I want backdoor cameras that work. Good locks. Real wages if I can get them there. A quiet moved through him, not surprise, but attention sharpening into decision. You've thought about this already. I started the second I realized I might not have to go back just to survive. He set the untouched whiskey down. Then do it. Emily looked up. Do what? Build it. She laughed once, disbelieving. You say things like it's simple. It can be made simple. She knew what that meant in his world. Money. Lawyers. Licenses moved faster because his name existed behind a phone call. Her instinct was to resist. To refuse the ease because ease had so often belonged to the wrong people. Vincent read that in her face. I am not buying you a cage, he said quietly. I am offering you tools. That landed exactly where it needed to. Emily stepped closer. And if I take them? His eyes darkened in that way she was beginning to understand. Not anger. Intensity with nowhere else to go. Then you use them, he said. And nobody calls you lucky for having survived something that should never have happened in the first place. She stood very still. Then she reached up and flattened her palm lightly against his chest, right over the slow, steady beat beneath the shirt. Do you ever get tired, she asked, of sounding like the most dangerous man in the city, and the only honest one in the room at the same time? Number. The answer was so immediate she laughed. He kissed her then. Not like the one by the windows after the live stream. Not sharp with adrenaline and new permission. This one was slower, deeper, almost reverent in the first second before it turned hungry under the surface. His hand settled at her waist firm enough to anchor, never enough to trap. Emily kissed him back with the calm certainty of somebody who had already survived being seen and found the world did not end. It only changed shape. Weeks later, Rosie's reopened under a new name painted carefully across the glass. Rosie's Grill and Coffee. Same place, better bones. Fresh tile replaced the cracked black and white squares. The booths had been reupholstered in deep red that no longer split at the seams. The kitchen got new locks and proper cameras. The staff board by the register listed emergency contacts, wage breakdowns, and one line Emily had insisted on in clean block letters. No guest gets to buy your dignity here. Rosie cried the first morning and denied it when anyone mentioned her eyes. Emily wore black slacks instead of the old uniform and moved through the room not like a woman trying to avoid attention, but like someone who understood the difference between service and surrender. The place was fuller now. Curious customers at first, then regulars again when the curiosity settled into routine. Officer Nolan came in on opening day and left a tip large enough to start an argument. Ava helped decorate and then sat at the counter staring around like her sister had somehow built a second life out of wreckage and fluorescent light. Claire from the old diner took a full-time shift and no longer shook carrying coffee. The back booth remained. Vincent took it on Thursday nights because some rituals were not worth breaking. He arrived after sunset in a dark coat with Nico 2 paces behind him, and the entire room felt the air shift in recognition. Not fear now, not exactly. Awareness. Even comfort in a strange way because everybody knew trouble did not dare begin where he sat. Emily brought him coffee herself. Black, she said, setting down the cup. He looked up at her. You remembered. Don't be charming. It will scare the customers. They should be afraid of false advertising. She laughed softly and slid into the seat across from him for a minute before the next rush started. Around them, silverware clinked. The pie case glowed. Snow moved past the windows in lazy white drifts. Vincent glanced around the room once. You did well. Emily followed his gaze. Rosie at the register pretending not to watch everyone at once. Claire taking an order with a steadier hand. Ava pinning up a handwritten sign for live music on Saturdays. Warm light falling where old flicker used to be. I did, Emily said. Not pride borrowed from his approval. Her own. He looked back at her, and there it was again, the rare thing in his face that no one else ever seemed to earn. What she asked, He brushed his thumb once over the side of her wrist where the bruises had long since faded. Nothing. You are a terrible liar. I know. Emily leaned forward a little. Then say it. His mouth curved by a fraction. You do not need me the way you did. The honesty of it moved through her gently and all at once. She reached across the table and took his hand. No, she said. I don't. He held her gaze. The room around them carried on. Orders called from the kitchen. Someone laughed at the counter. A bell over the door rang as 2 new customers entered, shaking snow from their coats. Emily tightened her fingers over his. That isn't the same as not wanting you here. Something in his expression went still in the deepest possible way. I know, he said. For a man like Vincent Moretti, the words sounded almost like relief. At closing, after the last coffee had been poured and the floors were mopped, and Rosie had finally gone home under Ava's strict orders to sleep, Emily stepped outside into the alley behind the diner with her coat pulled close and her hair damp from steam. Snow had stopped. The city smelled clean and metallic and faintly of bread from the bakery down the block. Vincent was already there, one shoulder against the brick wall, cigarette unlit between 2 fingers because he had been talking more than smoking. You're staring at my alley like you plan to buy it too, Emily said. He slipped the cigarette back into the pack. I am considering whether it needs better lighting. She smiled and walked over until she stood in front of him. The cold sharpened everything. The line of his jaw, the dark of his coat, the quiet between them that no longer needed to be defended against. You know, she said the first night I saw you in the diner, I thought you looked like trouble. I was. You still are. Yes. Emily tipped her head. Good. His hand came up slowly, giving her every chance to move if she wanted. She never did. His fingers settled under her jaw, warm against the winter air. I went there because it was quiet, he said. To Rosie's? Yes. And now? His eyes held hers. Now I go because it is the one place in this city where I can look across a room and see something I did not take, he said. Only something I was lucky enough not to lose. Emily felt her throat tighten. She shook her head a little, smiling through it. That was almost beautiful. Do not make me repeat it. I would never. He kissed her there in the alley under a weak yellow lamp and the hum of the city behind the building, not like a man claiming territory, not like a savior collecting gratitude, but like someone who had found the rarest possible thing in his world and knew exactly what it cost to stand in the light beside it. When they parted, Emily rested her forehead briefly against his and closed her eyes. The girl from the diner still existed somewhere in her. The one who flinched first. The one who measured every room for exit routes and every smile for danger. But she no longer ran the whole story. Inside, through the back door window, she could see the clean line of the counter and the soft, warm glow over the booths. Her place, her work, her choice. Her. Vincent followed her gaze. Peace, he said quietly. Emily smiled. Something like that. Then she opened the back door and went inside, and Vincent came in after her, and not one person in that room mistook her kindness for weakness ever again.